We can do it. Yes, we can. We can change things throughout the land, but we all must lend a hand. We can do it. Oh, yes, we can. Oh, your neighbor over there, a bit bewildered, but he cares. He just doesn't know what to do. Join together and then there'll be two. There are others all around, scattered throughout the town. Reach out and you will see your numbers swell to 3. We can do it. Yes, we can. We can change things throughout the land, but we all must lend a hand. We can do it. Oh, yes, we can. Now together, you form a core.
In 1996, after the war in Bosnia had been going on for a long time, and the shelling of Sarajevo, I went with the Fellowship of Reconciliation on a trip to Bosnia and stayed with some of the families who'd lost a lot of their loved ones. And in Sarajevo, the whole place looked like a graveyard. There was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fresh graves in every open space. And it was just a very out front example of what wars mean. You know, it's not nameless people that get killed and, you know, people lose their loved ones. It was massive numbers of people, and then meeting the families who'd lost their loved ones. And while I was in Bosnia, I heard about Kosovo, which was also a very oppressive kind of a situation, very much like apartheid in South Africa, where the Albanian majority, it was, I think, close to 90% of the population, could not, they'd been kicked out of the university and out of the schools, the medical clinics, they'd lost their jobs. And instead of responding with violence, as what had happened in Bosnia, violence among everybody, they had decided on nonviolent means to struggle against this Serbian repression. So I was so deeply touched. I was there in 96, and then again in 97, and then 98, and was working with the student movement, with the women's movement, with the teachers that were organizing alternative schools in homes because kids couldn't go to school, with the medical people that were setting up Mother Teresa clinics, free of charge. The doctors were offering their services, with the various political parties, with ex-political prisoners, all of whom were engaged in nonviolent means to try to challenge this oppression. And I was just deeply touched. The contrast between Bosnia, where there was not bombing, there was not destruction. Well, the students who had been kicked out of the regular university, where they'd been going to school there, and all their books had been burned. They were one of the strongest forces in the society. Were organizing nonviolent demonstrations to march from their. They were meeting in people's homes to have their classes, etc. Professors volunteering their services to their old university, and they invited me to come on September 1st of '97 to be present with them as they were, I think, 14,000 students march I guess I'd say walked in a very peaceful way, with flowers in their lapels. Most of the men had white shirts, and walking toward their old university. And I had gotten to know the organizers, the student leaders quite well. Well, at a certain point, the Serb police had blocked the way, and so the students, 14,000, stood in total silence for about 10 minutes facing the Serb police. And then the police just got an order, and they just rushed with their horses and with tear gas into the crowd, and people, dispersed in every direction they could. And then the students continued those peaceful walks to the university each month for quite a long period of time. And what people in that society were saying to me, students, women, teachers, medical people, political party folks, was we need to engage in much more active nonviolent resistance to challenge this oppression. Because it's an explosion waiting to happen. And, but for this to happen, we need international people to come and be present. David, can you find the people from the other parts of the world to come and accompany us so we can do more, courageous stuff in challenging this oppression and somehow wake up the world to the reality of what's going on here and bring moral pressure on the Serb government to change its policies, where we can all live as first-class citizens. Well, I took that seriously. I realized it was a pretty dangerous situation, and I didn't want what had happened in Bosnia to afflict Kosovo as well. So I went on a speaking tour in Europe and the United States, wrote articles, spoke on radio and television, saying essentially what the Kosovar people had said to me. This is an explosion. Kosovo is an explosion waiting to happen. The people there want to engage in more active nonviolent resistance, but they need international people to come and be a peaceful presence. Can you come? And most people said, where's Kosovo? Because there had not been a war there, and why should they know where Kosovo is? And then other people said, well, David, it sounds very important, but we're too busy. Students had to go to classes, people had jobs, people had to pay student debt, and people had other commitments. So most everybody said, no, we can't go. And in spring of '98, I had found four students that went with me. We went back to again accompany the Albanian folks, not hundreds or thousands, but 5 of us. And at that time, there were hundreds of thousands of people marching peacefully in the streets. People with their baby carriages, old people so crippled they could hardly walk with their canes, demanding an end to this repression. I did a nonviolent training for, I think, 800 people one night. And the next morning, we were arrested, and they cut our hair, shaved our hair, I guess I should say, and then put us in jail for being an international nonviolent presence. This is the Serb police that had done this. Well, we finally got thrown out of the country because it was interesting that 5 of us Americans who were a fly in the ointment, so to speak, of this massive nonviolent movement, we got international publicity, but the thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, got no publicity in the international press. So the government really didn't appreciate all this international press that we were getting. So they actually expelled us from the country, took us from jail, took us to the Macedonian border, and stamped in our passports. We couldn't come back for 10 years. But so we went to Washington, D.C. and made as big a splash as we could. Again, trying to put the attention on the people movement there, not on ourselves. But about a year later, in May of 1999, there was what was called a Hague Appeal for Peace, where more than 10,000 people from all over the world came to The Hague in the Netherlands to try to say we have to put an end to war. And I got invited to come and to organize a workshop each day on Kosovo, a 5-hour workshop each of 4 or 5 days, because by this time it was pretty much in the international press. And by that time, the violence had really escalated quite a bit from the Serb police. And President Clinton went on international television and said, there's ethnic cleansing happening in Kosovo, and we have 2 choices. We can look the other way and do nothing, or we can go in and start bombing. And those of us who had been in Kosovo knew that there was a third alternative, and that was to support the nonviolent struggle there. And of course, as soon as it became violent, the CIA started supporting the Kosovo Liberation Army, the military arm of the Kosovars, in fighting the Serb oppression. Anyway, we knew there was a third alternative. And then the U.S. continued bombing Kosovo and Belgrade and the rest of Serbia for, I think it was between 2 and 3 months. Lots of destruction, people killed, and the hatred which was instilled there will last for decades, probably centuries. And just because we passed up that opportunity to support the nonviolent struggle. So, and obviously supporting the nonviolent struggle would have been cost 1/millionth the cost of the bombing and the military operations. And I think it would have been much more effective. So this was the moral imperative to me that we needed to build a global nonviolent peace force of hundreds and eventually thousands of people from all over the world that could be trained and be prepared to go in to a conflict area at the invitation of local peacemakers, local human rights workers, to help support nonviolent means to resolve the conflict and to help protect civilians whose lives are endangered. And as most people probably know, over 80%, sometimes up to 90% of the casualties in these conflicts are civilians, people that are killed. And that's not acceptable. There is no such thing as a just war. When 90% of the people that are dying are innocent men, women, and children. They're not the guys with the guns. They're not the soldiers. So at the Hague Appeal for Peace, I put out this vision of a global nonviolent peace force. And Mel Duncan, who was there from Minnesota, and some other people said, yes, we have to do that. So it was at the Hague Appeal for Peace that the Nonviolent Peace Force was born, or the idea was born. I mean, Mahatma Gandhi had talked about a Shanti Sena, a nonviolent army, whatever that was, 40 years earlier. And it had been talked about, and it had been done on a small scale with Peace Brigades International and Witness for Peace, Christian peacemaker teams. But it hadn't been done on a scale where the world can take notice, and we would be prepared to respond to a place like Kosovo before it explodes into violence. So I spent the next 10 years or so of my life actually traveling all over the world, meeting with people who were peacemakers in their own communities, asking two questions. One, if we had something like the Nonviolent Peace Force, would this be helpful in the conflicts in your country or in your part of the world? And second, would you be interested in helping be a part of building a global nonviolent peace force, or participating in helping recruit people? And the answer to both those questions were yes. It would be very helpful, and we'd like to be a part of it. So I traveled all over Latin America and Asia and Europe. And another colleague, David Grant, did quite a bit of travel in Africa and the Middle East. And we found, I think, over 70, local organizations, groups, who said, yes, we'd like to be a part of the Nonviolent Peace Force. So between 1999 and 2002, some of us from different parts of the world began meeting and clarifying the vision of what it was we wanted to create and how we could do this, what would be a decision-making process, what would be the criteria for recruiting people, and what to do a study, what worked and what did not work in terms of doing this kind of nonviolent peacemaking, peacekeeping. And we, among other things, made a commitment that we didn't want this just to be Americans and Europeans, people from the North, helping our brothers and sisters in the South. This was to be a truly global effort with the decision-making body and the people who are the peace workers in the field would be representing all the world's people, not just one segment. So that's what has been developing, and the United Nations, by the way, expressed interest. I mean, part of the job of the UN, according to the charter, is to put an end to the scourge of war. And so this would be a natural for the UN, but they're a little more conservative or cautious. And what some of the people in the UN said, David, it sounds like a great idea, but you guys show that it can work for 8-10 years, and then we'll do it. Well, at least that's better than just saying we'll ignore it. So we got groups in Israel, Palestine, in Sri Lanka, and in Guatemala. There was actually 10, including Burma and Tibet and Colombia. There were about 10 groups that put in proposals, but we couldn't do everything at once. So we narrowed it down to the 3, Guatemala, Sri Lanka, and Israel, Palestine. And then tried to look at criteria, how could we be most useful with a relatively small number of people. And we finally decided on Sri Lanka, which was, at that point, there was a ceasefire between the Tamil Tigers and the Sinhalese government. And to really be a protection for communities. And there was a group called Sarvodaya, which was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, that was actually doing work in the fields. So now, 10 years later, the Nonviolent Peace Force has had a presence in Sri Lanka. We're now in Mindanao in the Philippines, invited by both the government and the Moral Islamic Liberation Front, which have been at war for decades. We are in South Sudan. working with the people who are endangered by the conflict, the internal conflict there between the various parties. And we're in Burma, where there is a ceasefire between the government and some of the armed ethnic groups. And again, trying to be a presence to help prevent or help support the ceasefires and help prevent the killing, the death of civilians. And now we've been invited to go to Sudan, to Syria, where I mean, as most people know, there's millions of refugees that have fled the country. Over 100,000 people have been killed. And so we are training people in these areas. We've been invited to come by people who are not supporting the government or the armed opposition, but are concerned about the civilian population there that is taking the brunt of the death and the destruction. So we're training local Syrians who can go into, who in these conflict areas, both the government-controlled area and the rebel-controlled area, and be a presence to help protect civilians who are so endangered there. And that is just beginning, but it's interesting that the UN agencies, UNICEF, UN High Commission for Refugees, among others, are really beginning to take notice of what the Nonviolent Peace Force is doing. UNITAR, which is the training outfit of the UN, and some European governments, especially Scandinavia, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, are beginning to see the contribution of a nonviolent peace force is really infinitesimally small, financial cost to armed peacekeeping, and really can often do a much better job. So some of those European governments and some of the UN agencies are beginning to fund some of these projects. So we now have over 200 people in the field, and our vision is still that we could recruit thousands. And these are people from Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, North America, Middle East. So we're literally a moral force of people from all over the world saying war is insane, and this idea of killing each other is insane, and we will help be a protective force for both the local peacemakers and human rights workers and the civilian populations whose lives are endangered. And I didn't say earlier that in many of these conflict areas, it is the local peacemakers and the local human rights workers whose lives are most endangered. And so by having this international presence, we on the outside aren't going to make the peace, but it's these local people that know the situation who, if they're not killed or disappeared or driven into exile, are the ones that can help create the peace. So providing that presence is very important. Just this year, the American Friends Service Committee has nominated the Nonviolent Peace Force for the Nobel Peace Prize for this year. So that is really exciting. And the American Friends Service Committee does not nominate groups lightly. They go through a very extended process, of all the groups and people around the world that are trying to help make a contribution to peace in the world. They've chosen the Nonviolent Peace Force, so that was deeply appreciated. I am now back with Peace Workers, the group that midwifed the Nonviolent Peace Force, And what we're doing is to working to support nonviolent movements, not just being a nonpartisan, international nonviolent presence, but actually to support nonviolent movements, struggles for justice. So examples of this, we've worked in Brazil with the landless movement, which are nonviolently occupying unused land and have gotten land for tens of thousands of people, farmers. So they have a means of livelihood. So it's one of the largest nonviolent struggles in the world. Sin tierra, I think it is, without land. We've supported the people in Tabasco that I think I mentioned, where the farmers and the fishermen, their lives are being destroyed and their livelihoods are being destroyed by the oil industry, and are courageously working for change. I mentioned we've continued to support the folks in Chiapas that are saying we have a right to live in peace and not be interfered with the military and the international economic elites to use our resources for their benefit rather than our benefit. We've been working with the people in Jeju Island, where the people have been nonviolently resisting the building of a massive new military base, which is a part of the U.S. pivot to Asia, surrounding China with military bases to be prepared for the next war with China. And people have been courageously blocking bulldozers and cement trucks every day for the last 8 years or so. And so we've been helping support international people from around the world, going to be a moral support to those local courageous people, but also then helping share the story through such things as The Ghost of Jeju, which is a great film. I have led a couple of groups to Iran. President George W. Bush declared Iran, Iraq, and North Korea the axis of evil. I think that was what he called it. And so again, the U.S. is prepared to go to start another major war, this time in Iran, with a country which is, in so many ways, it's much more like Europe than South Sudan or a place like that. And people are very well educated, people are very well organized, and if the United States thinks they've had a hard time in Iraq and Afghanistan, if we were to go to war in Iran, it would be madness. So anyway, with the Fellowship of Reconciliation, I led a couple of groups, like I'd done to the Soviet Union back in the 60s, just to get to know these people that our government says are the enemy, and for them to get to know us. And I was just deeply touched how human these people are, how much they are like American people. The last thing they want is a war. The U.S. supported Iraq in its war against Iran back whenever that was, it was in the 80s. And I think close to 2 million people died in those wars. And they don't want that again. And it's just, it's a no-brainer that we should try to resolve that conflict by war rather than negotiations. And luckily, even though a lot of people in the U.S. government thought war was the best answer, the American people woke up and let their Congress people know war was not the answer, and we're not going to support it. And luckily, at least for now, we have negotiated a peaceful resolution of that conflict. But the sanctions, which are hurting the people, many of those are still on. And I just met so many ordinary people who said, you know, all the world's religions teach us to love one another and to treat others as we would like them to treat us. And why do we have to resort to a war and to killing each other? And it's a great question, because we have different religions or different ideologies, or how to resolve, you know, how to live in our own society. It does not mean we need to go to war with each other. It's interesting when you put yourself in other people's shoes. We many in our own government say Iran is the enemy, but from their perspective, they are surrounded by American military bases and by places that the United States is bombing, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in the Persian Gulf, where we have our aircraft carriers and our military ships. Iran has not invaded another country in over 200 years. The United States shot down a Iranian civilian airliner, and then instead of apologizing, gave the captain of that ship a medal. Well, I think 150 or so people died in that air crash. Well, we overthrew their democratically elected government back in 54, 53. And actually, ever since we've done that, we did that because they were nationalizing the oil and wanted the benefits of the oil to go for the Iranian people, not for international oil companies. Well, that has laid the seeds for bringing in the Shah, who amassed enormous wealth for himself, but left the people in the in the dust. And then, as a response to that, the Iranian fundamentalists, are now in power, and we don't like them. So that's the reason. So and that's not probably what a lot of the Iranian people want either. But we have sowed the seeds for that by overthrowing their democratically elected government. So anyway, Americans have so much to learn. I think I mentioned Senator Fulbright, the former chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, writing this book, The Arrogance of Power. And I think, during the Cold War, there were two superpowers. And then when the Soviet Union bankrupted itself from this arms race, the United States was the lone remaining superpower. And somehow the power structure in this country think, well, we can rule the world. We can tell everybody what they want to do. And our military bases around the world, we can get things our way. And our economic, our political, our military power rules the world. And like all empires, our empire is going to disappear. We have to radically change our way of relating to the rest of the world, from one where me first, America first, everyone else, essentially they can make clothes, they can make computers, they can do everything for us at pay them very low wages. And we have a right to this because we're Americans. We have a right to their oil. There are nonviolent movements all around the world. They're challenging the existing oppressive situation in which people have to live. And in Palestine, it's really quite inspiring. I mean, there's like Kosovo, there's a very oppressive situation where people who have lived in this area for hundreds of years, thousands of years, are being treated as second-class citizens and are having their homes demolished, and having their water taken away, having thousands of settlers moving into what was their grazing land for their sheep and animals, and who have to go through checkpoints to visit relatives or even get to the hospital. And this massive wall has been built between Israel and Palestine, which is not actually on the border. It is often separating farmers from their fields or from their neighbors or their friends. So every Friday in a number of villages in the West Bank, people they go from the mosque where they have a prayer service, and then they begin a walk to the wall, which is they're trying to get to their fields, but this wall is there. And when they get anywhere close to the wall, the Israeli soldiers open fire with their rubber bullets and their tear gas and their stink bombs. And the tear gas is unbelievable. I mean, you can hardly breathe. We were accompanying people in some of these villages as they attempted to walk. And it's not just the Palestinians who live in these communities, Israelis, anarchists against the wall, the rabbis for human rights, other international groups, combatants against the war, or combatants for peace, which include both people who've been in the Israeli armed forces and Palestinians that were militants, have decided, instead of fighting with each other, we have to find a peaceful resolution to this conflict. So former Israeli pilots of the planes that had to bomb Gaza, for instance, are in these peaceful demonstrations and speaking in Hebrew to the Israeli soldiers that are shooting at the local folks. So this is an amazing effort to nonviolently challenge this oppression. And what they're hoping to do is to not only touch the conscience of the Israeli people, but to wake up the international community that there has to be some peaceful solution that can be a just way of resolving this conflict, where it's not one side wins and the other side loses. I had the opportunity to visit Gaza. We had what we called the Gaza Freedom March, where about 1,400 people from all over the world came to Cairo. And we called the Gaza Freedom March. And we were going to go to Gaza just to say there's been a embargo where the people of Gaza it's like living in a prison. They cannot leave. Other people cannot come and visit them. They cannot get food or medicines or building supplies. And the farmers, who some of the best land is along the Israeli border. If the people try to farm that land, they get shot at by Israeli police. When the fishermen go out beyond, I think, 1.5 kilometers or so to fish, they're shot at. The boats, which have been taking medical supplies and supplies to the people of Gaza from around the world, they've gotten shot at. Some internationals have been killed, and the people get arrested. So it really pains me especially when I think about my dad being there, 1949. That's what is it, 66 years ago, 67 years ago. These people had to flee their homes during the 48 Palestinian-Arab War, had to flee their homes, and they're still refugees. And their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren are refugees. It's just one of the many examples around the world which is crying for a peaceful resolution. And the more people use armed force, the more the Israeli government uses violence to try to repress, to shoot at, to arrest people, the more enmity that builds in people, and the harder it is to make that peaceful solution. So right now we have people in Gaza that are actually helping organize what we call alternatives to violence, which are nonviolent training in how to both live more nonviolently, and living in that very oppressive pressure cooker every day is very, very difficult. And people end up taking this out on their family members, by other fellow students, on each other, and I think the Hamas government, I think, which is pretty radical, if you will, in challenging the Israeli government, was a response to this Israeli repression. We talk about the need for a fundamental change in American policy relating to the rest of the world, rather than the arrogance of power and the economic, military, political domination of the world. That's not going to happen just by wishful thinking. Nothing but a powerful, sustained, nonviolent movement of the people in the United States and people in other parts of the world, where we say we'll no longer put up with this, has a chance to change. I think the kind of resistance we did at Nuremberg Actions in Concord, blocking the trains that were carrying bombs to kill people in other parts of the world, the kind of work that happened during the Vietnam War, where people were blocking induction centers, and people supporting soldiers that were not obeying orders anymore. The kind of resistance we did in San Francisco to when the United States invaded Iraq, or the people power, the 15 million people around the world that for one day demonstrated against that American war. But we've got to continue that on a sustained basis. I think if the world had done that in early 2003, I think the U.S. we would have realized there'd be a worldwide revolution on our hands, if against the will of the world's people, we were going to start this war based on lies. So we have so much to learn from Gandhi, from King, from Cesar Chavez, from Dorothy Day, from Walesa, from the people of South Africa, from the women of Liberia, who found the courage to confront the war makers, including their own government, to stop that war that had been going on for decades, to come to a negotiated settlement, and they got rid of their dictator. The women surrounded the place that that the leaders were having their negotiations, and said, "You're not getting out of here until you stop this war and resolve this conflict." And they did it, and now they have a woman president. Well, that's people power. The people power in the Philippines that brought down the Marcos government. We somehow have to find the courage for that kind of courageous, sustained struggle. Martin Luther King at one point said, "We have the power in this room, if we mobilize it, to completely change the future course of America." And that was, I think, 40, 50 people that were in that church basement when he was saying that. But he believed that, and he helped other people believe that, and then they acted on that, and were helped bring about radical change in how this country treated, people of color. Well, that's needed now to treat. King talked about racism, militarism, and materialism, our addiction to things, at the expense of people in other parts of the world. We need to address all those three, and Black Lives Matter is addressing the racism. There are people all over the world that realize that this addiction to war and militarism is a massive problem. And through the environmental movement, we're realizing the cost to future generations if we continue this consumer binge on using fossil fuels and ever more things to try to satisfy people's desires, rather than how could we build a world that where there's enough for everyone and for future generations. When 9/11 happened, I wrote a letter to the Washington Post, which actually was published, in which I said, the United States has spent trillions of dollars trying to, through our intelligence and through our military, to provide security for the American people. And we've seen that this got us zero security. All the attacks in New York and in Washington. And isn't it time to try something else? And what if we were to treat the whole world as part of our human family, and put the hundreds of billions of dollars that we're spending on wars and preparations for wars in helping create a better life for every person on the planet? Wouldn't this be much more successful in helping provide more security for the American people and for all people in the world? Well, some people called me that read that letter in the Post and were in tears, saying this is exactly what we need to do. But unfortunately, people in Washington decided that what we really wanted was war. And I think we have seen through the wars in Afghanistan and the wars in Iraq that it's like digging ourselves deeper and deeper into a hole. The more we break into people's homes to drag out people that we want to, kill or torture or imprison, the more we bomb people, the more we use our drones, even if we do kill a militant in a drone or a couple of militants, there are probably at least 10 civilians who die. And each of those 10 people has at least 50 family members and friends who are incensed that their friend was killed by this country, the other side of the world, the United States. And that's what's recruiting people to join Al-Qaeda and to join ISIS. And I mean, I think it's been said, we're recruiting people for ISIS and Al-Qaeda much faster than we can kill them. So I just wish, I wished then and I still wish now that our government could wake up and put ourselves in other people's shoes. We are bombing 7 countries, 7 Muslim countries in the Middle East and in Northern Africa. And from their perspective, this looks like another Crusades. Well, at any rate, we would, in response to the invasion of Afghanistan, in San Francisco, we started a weekly vigil, which has been taking place every week for now 15 years, every Thursday at noon at the Federal Building, where we are saying there is a better way than bombing people to try to resolve conflict. And I mean, as in any conflict, maybe you'll show by military force who has more power, but it's not going to resolve the conflict. It just sows the seeds for future conflicts. And then here, before the attack on Iraq, which we now know was based totally on lies, the weapons of mass destruction, etc. Around the world, 15 million people demonstrated to try to prevent that attack. The New York Times said this is the world's second superpower, world public opinion. And unfortunately, again, the Bush government decided not to listen to the world's people. Instead, went ahead based on their lies and started this war with Iraq, which has, from the benefit of the people in Iraq, there's been absolutely no benefit. Their country is destroyed. Their tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of their people have been killed. Millions of people are refugees. And the United States has spent trillions of dollars in this war and will continue to spend on all the veterans who've suffered so deeply from this war. We are digging ourselves deeper and deeper into a hole and making more and more enemies. And ISIS was not even born before the U.S. attack on Iraq. So we have created ISIS, and now we continue to recruit more and more people to ISIS. So people in the U.S. and in other parts of the world are saying, this is not working. We have to try something else. So in San Francisco, we have, for 15 months after the invasion of Iraq in 2003, we did die-ins in front of the Federal Building each month, representing all the people that were dying in Iraq and saying we cannot continue with business as usual, blocking the front entrance to the Federal Building. We've had die-ins on Market Street. When that war started, the people of San Francisco had die-ins and blocked the whole financial district. The financial district was closed down for, I think it was 3 days at the beginning of that war. These are the kind of very courageous nonviolent tactics that have to be used to say we will no longer cooperate by our silence when crimes against humanity, when stupid policies are being instituted by our government, which are not going to make us more secure. I've been working with the American Friends Service Committee and with a group called World Beyond War to develop what we're calling a shared security, where the idea is in this day of globalization, et cetera, there's no such thing as national security, where you can get security for one country and insecurity for others. It's got to be security for all of us. And there are methods. There's negotiation, there's mediation, there's nonviolent peacekeeping, there is the International Court of Justice, there's the World Court, there's the International Criminal Court, there's the United Nations. To resolve any conflict, you have to bring together all the players to talk and to try to listen to what are the needs of people on all sides, and then to try to find what is a way to meet as many needs as possible. And instead of that, we send in the bombing planes. And when we are putting 50% of our federal budget into wars and preparations for wars, every conflict looks like a nail needing to be hammered. And we are giving scant resources or energy to looking at how to resolve these conflicts peacefully. So it's a radical change that is needed in American policy. And I'm happy to say that through peace studies programs at our universities, through organizations like World Beyond War, which now has many tens of thousands of people who have signed a pledge that we need to find peaceful means to resolve conflicts. War is as outmoded and as useless a way of resolving conflict as anything we can imagine. And just as we abolished slavery, just as we got the 8-hour work week, 8-hour day work day through the labor unions, just as we got the women's right to vote, we can end war. And people of the world are suffering so badly from this addiction to violence and war as a way of resolving conflict. So I hope that people will go to worldbeyondwar.org, and we have there a 10-minute video of the choice between the world's people. $2 trillion a year is going into wars and preparations for wars, half of that from the United States. What we could do with that $2 trillion a year, or even a significant portion of that, to create a better life for every person on the planet. And I think we would all be so much more secure.
Yes, we can. We can change things throughout the land, but we all must lend a hand. We can do it. Oh, yes, we can. We can do it. Yes, we can. We can change things throughout the land, but we all must